So if we look at the time period of Abraham, if we look at what was going on during the end of the Ice Age, we see that this is the time of the worldwide flood, and Neanderthals also come out of their caves. This is also the time that Abraham leaves the land of Ur and he goes into the land of Canaan. And Neanderthal fossils can be found in Israel and Turkey that date back to the end of the Ice Age, the very same time that Abraham came into the land. So all of the Neanderthal fossils that can be found in caves in Israel and Turkey and the surrounding areas, they date back to the time of the end of the Ice Age, the very same time of the so-called Abraham. So the Bible says Abraham was born in the land of Ur. This is also known as the land of summer, or the land of the Chaldeans. And you'll notice that every time Abraham's birthplace is mentioned, it also says this is the land of the Chaldeans. And this is the exact same place in the land of Ur where the Sumerians, or the people of Ur, or the people of summer, who were Cushites, this is where the Cushites created a variety of species by genetically modifying and mingling animal and human DNA together, creating a variety of animalistic, human-like species. So we're told that Abraham is from the land of Ur, from the land of the Chaldeans. So Abraham and the seed of Abraham comes from the land of Ur. Even Abraham's father and his father. And if we go further back before Abraham all the way to Noah, we're told in the story of Noah that Noah and his family repopulates the earth, and Abraham comes from Noah, right? So even this story, this biblical story of Noah, is actually the story of Gilgamesh. This also comes from the Cushite account in the cuneiform tablets that come from the Cushites. So the very same people who were genetically modifying these creatures, and Abraham comes from the land of the genetically modified creatures, these very same people are the ones who give us the real flood account. And this real flood account speaks of Gilgamesh, who was a Cushite, and Enkidu, who was a half-human, half-beast-like creature. So again, the same people who are genetically modifying animals and human DNA in the land of Ur also give us the real flood story. And according to the Bible, this is where Abraham comes from the land of Ur. So we have to look at the big picture, and we have to see who Abraham really was. So let's examine some of the things that Abraham did when he first came into the land. Keep in mind that Abraham is a stranger in the land. And in Genesis 12, verse 13 through 20, you can see what Abraham did when he comes into the land of Egypt. He deceives the Egyptian king with his sister, who was also his wife. And what he does is, before he goes into Egypt, he talks to his wife and he says, look, when we get to Egypt, don't tell them that you are my wife. Just say you're my sister. So then he goes to Egypt and he basically is pimping out his sister and who is also his wife, and he's basically pimping her out to the Egyptian king. And in the end, Abraham's wife brings plague and disease and so many problems to the Egyptian household. So the Egyptian king sends to bring Abraham back to his house, and he asks Abraham, why did you lie to me? Why did you say that she was your sister, but she's your wife? And he said, well, she's my sister and my wife. And in the end, Abraham and his wife left with cattle and gold and silver, and they left Egypt rich. As the Bible says, Abraham left Egypt a rich man. So what does Abraham do? He does the same thing again, just a few pages later in the Bible. He goes into the land of Gerar, which is Israel. And once again, he uses his wife and pimps his wife out to the king of the land. and brings plague and famine and disease to the land of Israel. And the king of Israel said the same thing to Abraham. Why did you lie to me and tell me she was your sister? And Abraham said the same thing again. She's my sister and my wife. So far, Abraham's only been in the land but a short time, and he's brought disease and plagues to the land of Egypt and Israel. And he's done this by deceiving the kings using his wife, who is his sister. Now, Abraham wasn't the only one in the Bible to practice incest. In fact, the whole Abrahamic bloodline was created from incest. And we can read in Genesis 19:29 through 30, we see that Lot has sex with his two daughters, giving birth to the Ammonites and the Moabites. After God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot leaves and he goes back to his cave with his two daughters. So I want to show you the association between the Abrahamic seed and the cave beasts, or the Neanderthals. Because remember that all of those Neanderthal fossils that can be found in the caves in Israel and Turkey, they all date to the time that Abraham came into the land. So the Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 23 that Abraham uses all of the gold and silver that he got from Egypt to buy a cave in Israel. He bought the cave from Ephron, the Hittite. Keep in mind that the Hittites are an Indo-European tribe that invaded the land of Hatti, aka Turkey, during the time that Abraham came into the land. So the Hittites are invaders as well. So again, we find the Neanderthal fossils in Israel and in Turkey, and we have a Hittite of Turkey selling the land or the cave to Abraham in Israel. Keep in mind that the land of Israel was Egyptian territory, and no Hittite invader had the right to sell any of the land in Israel. And if Abraham was a black man, why did he bury his dead in caves like the Neanderthals? Because black people never buried their dead in caves. The Neanderthals did. So we can read in Job 30, and he writes about the fathers of the cave beasts. And he says, whose fathers I would have disdained to have set with the dogs of my flock. And it says that they dwelt in the cliffs of the valleys, in caves of the earth, in the rocks. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they were gathered together. They were the children of fools, the children of base men. They were viler than the earth. And we can read in Judges 6:2 that the Medians, who are Cushites, chased the children of Israel back into their caves and dens in the mountains. And again in 1 Samuel in 13:6, the children of Israel were again chased back into the caves and in the rocks, in the high places and the pits of the earth. And in Genesis 49:29, we read that when Jacob is to be buried before he dies, he gathers all of his children, or the 12 tribes of Israel, and he says, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite. So he's referring to the very same cave that Abraham supposedly bought from the Hittite, and this cave is in Israel. So the location of Abraham's cave is mentioned throughout the Bible various times, and it's in the land of Canaan. And we can see that Isaac and Ishmael were also buried in this cave. Even Jesus is buried in a cave. And the people who were known as the so-called Hebrews, or the Habiru, the Bible says that they wandered in the deserts and in the mountains and in the dens and the caves of the earth. And remember that the people known as the Hebrews today are in early times known as the Habiru. And the Habiru, or the Hebrews, or the seed of Abraham, were cave dwellers. They dwelt in the caves of the earth. So Akhenaten, who is your biblical Moses, who is responsible for the writings that later became known as the Book of Psalms, we see what he writes about the cave beasts. He says, "The dogs have encompassed me. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet." And this Abrahamic seed that later became the Hebrews, or the so-called chosen people of the Bible. Well, if they're so holy, then ask yourself, why will only 144,000 of them be left? Why is it? There's billions of people in the world. But you mean to tell me that the so-called holy Hebrews, when God destroys them, there will only be 144,000 of them left, 12,000 from each tribe? And in reference to the destruction of Israel, or the seed of Abraham, this is the stela from an Egyptian king who kept record of military battles that he had in Libya and in the land of Israel. And he states that Israel is wasted and his seed is not. And actually, what happened was these people were never totally destroyed. Even the Bible accounts for the fact that the original inhabitants of the land never totally destroyed them. The Egyptians and the Cushites never totally decimated these creatures. In fact, what happened was many of them mingled into the Cushite and the Egyptian bloodlines. So they have evolved over time. So they were never actually totally destroyed, but they have evolved, constantly mingling themselves in to the black bloodlines of the earth. And this is why the Bible speaks of them grafting themselves in to the original olive branch, okay, to the original olive tree. And then it speaks of them as being the branches of the tree. They're not the original root. They are the branches of the tree, the ones who have grafted themselves in. So we can see that the Neanderthals existed for a time, then later the Homo erectus, and then later Homo sapiens, and every other creature in between that they want to classify. But the thing is that we can see the evolution of the white races. We can see that they begin as creatures in the land of Ur. We can see that they're later cave dwellers, upright beasts and cave dwellers. And we can see that each time this species, the species of Neanderthal, it dies off. And then we see a new species that is created because they're constantly evolving. So they have evolved over time. So not only were Abraham, Lot, Isaac, and Jacob, and the children of Israel all cave dwellers, but according to the Jewish tradition, and the Bible, and the Torah, and the Quran, they were all buried in Hebron, in the cave that Abraham supposedly bought from the Hittite. So the cave of Abraham in Hebron is known by the Muslims as the Ibrahimi Mosque, and by the Christians and the Jews, it's called the Cave of the Patriarchs. And as you can see, the architecture of the building is actually that of the Muslims. And this is because the Muslims built a mosque on top of the so-called Cave of the Patriarchs. This was long after the cave existed and the patriarchs were buried there. When the Muslims came in, this took place during the so-called time of the Muslim conquest of the Middle East. So the point of this video is to show you the connection between the creatures that were created in the land of Ur, later known as the Neanderthals or the Abrahamic seed. These creatures are the very same people who came out of the land of Ur and invaded the African lands or the land of Canaan. They were cave dwellers, and they buried their dead in a cave in Israel. And these Neanderthals are the patriarchs of the Abrahamic religions of today. They are the forefathers of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And the DNA evidence proves that white people are the cave beasts. They are the Neanderthals. And the Neanderthal fossils that have been found in caves in Turkey and in Israel. These Neanderthal fossils date to the time of the Abrahamic invasion. So all of these events took place at the same time. The end of the Ice Age, the worldwide flood. The Egyptians and the Cushites survived and documented the flood. And this is the same time that the cave beasts came out of their caves, because they were probably flooded out due to the worldwide flood. And this is the same time that we see the so-called Abrahamic seed that comes out of the land of Ur and comes into the African lands. And it's the very same time that Abraham buys this cave in Israel and he buries his dead, and Abraham's seed is in the caves in Israel, and the Neanderthal fossils that are found in the caves in Israel date to the very same time of Abraham. So we know that the Neanderthals and the seed of Abraham came into the land at the very same time. So I just want to let everyone know that I will make a part 2 on the seed of Abraham, and in part 2 I'll explain the 12 tribes of Israel.